and good morning to everyone.
This meeting is now being recorded.
So glad that you could all join us. I know that Census 2020 seems like it's a ways out, but I'm sure as you have seen in the news, there's already been a lot of discussion about it, already a lot of work on it, and we need to take action now to make sure that we have a fair and accurate count. So today is the first of what will be a series of census webinars. And Nellie, can you advance the slide for me? Can you go to the next slide for the agenda? Is it going, Nellie? I love technology.
I thought I had it. Give me 1 second. Where did it go?
Hold on, folks. The beauty of technology. Getting past the first slide. Well, why don't we, there we go. We're getting there. Thanks, Lacy. Why don't you just go ahead and move the slides for us so we keep going. So with the agenda today, we're going to try to accomplish a lot within an hour and cover some really introductory information regarding the census. And first, we're going to hear from Lacy Dawson, who is the State Director of Michigan Voice, and she's going to talk about what's really at stake for all of the communities and why the census really matters to all of us. The next person we'll hear from is Joan Gustafson. She's the External Affairs Officer of MNA, and she's going to talk about really how nonprofits can be more engaged in this work, why it matters, and then particularly talking more about how nonprofits and how you can engage in what's called the Nonprofits Count campaign that you'll hear more about shortly. After that, we will hear from Sheilah Clay, who will give us a great overview of lessons from the field and the amazing work that she did in 2010 so that you can hear a little more about the rationale for why Neighborhood Service Organization was involved, as well as hear more about what specific tactics they employed. And then, of course, we'll have Q&A. So, Nellie, can you go forward to the next screen for us? Seems like it should be easy. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off over to Lacy. Lacy, thank you so much again for agreeing to speak and to talk about what's at stake today. And go ahead, and I will hand things over to you. Thanks, Lacy.
Thank you, and thank everyone for joining the call this morning. I am very excited and want to just say that I'm very proud of the Michigan Nonprofit Association and really excited about being part of their team. It is very valuable to be part of a team that got out in front of the Census 2020 project way ahead of other states. So I'm part of a national network, and when I'm on calls and they're talking about census, I can say in Michigan, the Michigan Nonprofit Association has really held it down and is really a great thought partner in leading this effort. So thank you all at the MNA for your hard work. Really quickly, I just want to say that, it's going to be 10 years in a minute. It doesn't seem like it's been 10 years. But it has. It's been 10 years. We'll be going into this decennial count, and it's going to be something that's very important. 10 years ago, the landscape was very different. I believe there were hard-to-count communities that were a part of the nucleus of this country 10 years ago, but right now the landscape is so much different that it's going to behoove and take all of us really pushing and prodding and making sure we're working together to help make this count make sense for everyone involved. The current political landscape, we don't have to go into detail about what's going on with that, but it is not the same as it was 10 years ago. It is something that a lot of people have a lot of fear of being counted. People that I know who are professionals, people who have good jobs, people who are secure in their citizenship, are stating that they don't want to be counted, that they are afraid to be counted this year because of the current administration. And so I think we're going to be pushing an uphill battle, but together, together, if we lock arms together, we'll be able to do this, and changing the ideology and mindset of what census means to our communities, our country, and our work. So we have to help create a mindset in our communities and amongst ourselves that this census count is important. It is not just important for us, but it's important that we take away the fear of being counted, and we don't just talk about being counted, but we talk about communities being heard, communities being seen, communities being respected, and communities being able to be the democracy that communities are supposed to be the government that government is supposed to be, and take care of those that are less fortunate amongst our communities. So I think that one plea from me about the census is that we take this and we make it something where collectively our consciousness understands why we must do this, why this is not simply checking a box, but this is counting the hearts, the minds, and the souls of those who live amongst us, and making sure that their voices are definitely something that's being heard. Amongst the hard-to-count communities, we know there are people of color, there are immigrants, there are undocumented individuals, there are young children, low-income, homeless individuals, and those traditionally served by nonprofits. Those are the people that we care so much about, and those are the people whose resources will be diminished if they're not counted. And so we want to make sure that they're counted, that they feel safe, and that they feel secure. And I think nonprofits, not just think that nonprofits, but I know that nonprofits are the best at doing that, because nonprofits genuinely care about the whole person and not simply about the deliverables. So I think this team here and the growing team that it will make Michigan's count the best count that has ever been seen under the leadership of the Michigan Nonprofit Association. So let's get ready for that. I'm excited about census. Everybody should be walking around happy and excited and smiling about this census count. Next slide, please. And the last thing that I want to say is a lot of times community looks at us when we launch campaigns and they see this sporadicness of, oh, we need you now. Now is the time that we need you again. But that we have to take this census, this decennial, from just being a moment, like we're going to count people, from a moment to actually making it a movement. Like, how do we build on this collective energy that will be going throughout this country and throughout this state to make sure that we're building great neighborhoods together, that folks are coming into relationships that will be long-term relationships, and that we put the commune back into community. So we need to make sure that this is not just a count, that we are helping communities understand that it is about bringing our voices together and the empowerment and the creation of a movement, and not just a moment of time where folks are just filling out documents and giving away that information. So it's going to take a lot of education to community to understand the census is connected to more than just count. It's connected to redistricting. It's connected to democracy. It's connected to education funding. It's connected to people being seen. We don't want our homeless communities not to be seen because they have specific needs. I know that you all know this. I feel a little bit preaching to the choir, but we're going to keep preaching. We're going to keep working together. We're going to keep motivating each other, and we're going to make this census 2020 the best census in the country and the best census that has ever been seen. So I just want to say I'm proud to be part of the team and looking forward to working with everyone. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over to the MNA. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Lacy. That was fantastic. I loved a couple of things that you pointed out there. And if folks would do me a favor, if you could mute your phone, that would help us out a lot with background noise. Just really briefly, I loved what you said, count the minds, hearts, and souls, and make sure that people are counted. I think that's fantastic. I love the idea of locking arms together. You brought out a lot of wonderful visuals that, I think Joan will really be able to build on as she talks more regarding exactly not just she's building on what's at stake and why this is important, but now talking more about the action that we can undertake. So, Joan, with that, I will hand things over to you.
Great. Thanks, Erin and Lacy. Good morning, everyone. So in September of 2017, which is basically a year ago this month, MNA received a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to launch an ambitious campaign to involve nonprofits to help the state get a complete and accurate count in this census. And when we set about, thinking about what our goals would be, we decided that the goals of the campaign would be to maintain the participation rates from the 2010 census for the statewide number of respondents for this census. And while that doesn't sound maybe like such a lofty goal, you might not know that Michigan did quite well in the 2010 census. We did get, a pretty decent count. And as has been alluded to this time, we have a lot more challenges. So our goal is to do at least as well as we did last time, but even more than that, to try to boost the participation rates in the communities and the populations that Lacy referenced, those that are historically undercounted. And then the second part of the goal of the campaign is to create a coalition of nonprofits that are poised and ready to address future democracy issues. So we don't want to just be one and done with the census work. We want to take this coalition and this group and this energy to address any kinds of challenges that might affect our communities going forward. And so our strategy is to mobilize nonprofits and focus on populations that not just this time, but really are historically undercounted. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that the groups that Lacy mentioned, communities of color, immigrants, young children, all those groups are going to need special attention from us this time. If we're going to convince people that it's not only critical that they fill out the census survey, but that it's safe to fill out the census, that message cannot come from, elected officials or Washington, D.C. or Lansing. That message has to come from trusted individuals, and we all know that nonprofits are some of the most trusted organizations in communities, not just rural or urban, but rural, because, we maintain everyday contact, we understand cultural sensitivities and literally in some cases speak the language of the people that we serve, and, we really understand how a potential loss of this kind of funding, if we don't get people counted, not only how is that going to impact our communities, but if we have some of these big gaps in fundings that if we're not drawing down these federal dollars, our communities are going to turn to us to fill in those gaps. And so just as an example, we're estimating that for each person that is not counted in the census, we stand to lose $1,800 per person per year. And that is for 10 years because we're really stuck with these numbers for 10 years. So just as an example, let's just say that 5,000 young children in a city don't get counted. They're missed. That's 5,000 times 1,800 times 10. That's $90 million. And, that's a lot of money for us to raise. We know that. And so this is just critical that we make sure that we're getting everybody counted. The federal funds are a huge issue for our communities and for nonprofits, but also for our representation. Michigan lost 2 congressional seats after the 2010 count, and we are likely to lose another seat after this count. And that just makes us weaker as a state as we're trying to protect our interests, throughout the country. So those are two of the biggest reasons why we need to make sure everybody understands how important this is and why we are really some of the best suited organizations in the state to get that done. So now if you look at the next slide, this framework slide that the Council of Michigan Foundations put together for us early on shows how we have organized this campaign and the roles and the responsibilities of everybody. So when you look at the different elements that we've been kind of behind the scenes for a lot of it, putting this together over the last year, The elements of the overall campaign include the fundraising piece, which we've been doing with the Council of Michigan Foundations for more than a year. We've put together a nonprofit complete count committee that has been meeting since February. They've already had 3 meetings, and this is a statewide group. It has about 40 or so statewide organizations that are members that serve the populations that we're really interested in getting counted. And that group is chaired by Donna Murray Brown, the president and CEO of MNA, and Hassan Jaber, who's the CEO of Access. And Hassan also serves on the advisory council of the U.S. Census Bureau. So he's been extremely helpful to us, and we're really lucky to have him here in Michigan guiding this campaign. So the statewide communications strategy, the tools, the trainings, the advocacy work, the government relations, all that you'll see on the first column under campaign infrastructure, and all that work at the state level is being led by MNA. As far as, just to point out, the main things that we've been advocating for in the policy space is the fully funding the census. So the funding was a big job, trying to make sure that the U.S. Census Bureau is getting adequate funding to do this work. But in addition to that, it'd just be important to know that MNA did take a position against including a citizenship question on the survey. And so we're going to see how that plays out. Many of you may know there are a number of lawsuits that are trying to get that question off the survey right now because, frankly, we just don't think measures like that are going to help us get people counted. So there's more that you can read about the policy positions and everything. But so that's MNA's role for the most part, an outline. And then if you look at the second column, you'll see that we have identified what we're calling census hubs, which are there'll be about 8 to 10 of them throughout the state. They're usually, community foundations, United Ways, and larger nonprofits that are going to act as regional organizations that will develop plans that are unique for their area. They'll be awarding and monitoring mini grants to the nonprofits that will get into the communities and work with the communities and people that fill out their surveys. They'll be doing trainings, serve as local campaign managers, work with local officials, because that's another thing. MNA and some of these local or regional groups have been working very closely with our state demographer and our representatives from the U.S. Census Bureau to make sure that we're not duplicating resources, that we're all working in the same direction, and that we're really leveraging all the resources that we're raising, all the funds that we're raising, and all the time, because as we know, capacity is always an issue for us. And then the third column is where you'll see the roles and responsibilities of the actual local grassroots organizations that will be tapped to contact the people in the neighborhoods that we identify as some of the hardest to count neighborhoods in the state. And what they'll be doing is educating their communities and serving as those trusted messengers and coordinating with all the rest of us so that, so we're getting that message out and we're getting as many people to fill out their surveys as we possibly can. So that's an overview of the campaign, how it's structured right now. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's a lot of ways to plug into the campaign, and we hope that everybody gets involved. And one of the first things that are coming up next Monday, September 24th, is when we're holding the press conference that will officially kick off the campaign. And we're really excited because Mayor Duggan is going to be on hand to give remarks about why this is so important for Detroit in particular, what he's going to talk about, but really for all the cities and for all of us throughout the state. And also joining the press conference is the acting director of the U.S. Census Bureau, Ron Jarman. So there'll be other speakers there, and we really hope if you're in the area and if you have the time that you can join us. It's going to be a wonderful event. We really want to show that we have a very broad and big coalition of nonprofits that are ready and willing to make sure that Michigan gets an accurate count. And then the other thing, if you flip to the next slide, we have launched a website just for nonprofits and just for kind of a clearinghouse of all the information, all the events and the trainings and everything that we do. It's called BeCountedMI2020.com. And if you go to that site and you click on the Engage page, you can sign up for our newsletters, and then that way you can kind of keep plugged into what's going on, what's the latest and greatest. Now, this isn't like a huge website. It's a microsite. It's really easy to navigate. It's really easy to get what you need and the resources. There's going to be a lot of downloadable resources and a lot of information on that for the nonprofit sector to get so that we're arming everybody with everything that they need to make sure that we get a good count. So that's all I've got right now as far as information on the campaign and connecting you to everything that we're going to be doing in the next couple years. And again, I really hope everybody joins the campaign.
Thanks, Joan. That was such a good reminder about, how the campaign overview works, and I know they can get more information on the website as well as opportunities for them to participate right now with the press conference as well as signing up for the e-newsletter. So that's fantastic. And what folks should probably know is that MNA was very successful in their work in 2010 to really work towards a fair and accurate census count to make sure that the folks that nonprofits serve are counted. And so MNA was recognized for that work that they did in 2010. And one of the groups that was just absolutely phenomenal in their efforts because of that was the Neighborhood Service Organization, and Sheilah Clay was the leader there. So we are so happy to have Sheilah here today to talk about, what she learned from 2010, but also some of the rationale and the tactics. So, Sheilah, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Erin. This was a phenomenal effort on our part, and we were glad to be part of Census 2010 and look forward to 2020. Some of the reasons, if you go to the next slide, some of the real critical reasons why the nonprofit sector needs to be involved have been stated, and I'm going to talk about them just very briefly. One, it is very critical regarding the advocacy that we seek all the time from our state House representatives regarding educating them about the impact of laws they're going to pass, the impact on our constituents. When we lose those seats, there's an impact on our ability to make sure that our programming is funded and that they understand the impact to people. As you all stated earlier, we lost 2 seats in 2010. We're projected to lose a seat in 2020, which means we will go from 14 to 13, and we need approximately 146,000 people counted to avoid that from happening. So that is one of the reasons that it is really important to the nonprofit sector that the count be accurate. The other one is the programs that the nonprofit sector are known for supporting, for pushing the people that we serve depend on, like Head Start, Medicaid, the Women and Infant Program, SNAP. All of these programs that we use to help support low-income families, the homeless population, and more, those are federally funded programs that are directly impacted by the census count. So if our census count is lower, our federal allocation is lower. And that is one of the strategies that we use a lot to help people understand why this is important. You have to make it relational to the people that you're talking to so that they don't see some disconnect between the census count and what is happening in their life. And so that was another major reason why the nonprofit sector should play a major role in what is happening with the census count. And then Lacy talked about earlier the trust. We know our communities. Our community members depend on us. We are in the best seat to dispel some of the myths that people have. I remember very clearly in 2010 having to really try to help people understand that the data that was being collected by the Census Bureau was not going to be turned around and used by another department in government, which could turn around and hurt the very people who shared that information. We're trusted. We know them. We're the ones who can help them understand understand what that envelope is going to look like when it comes to their home, so they don't think it's junk mail and throw it out. We're the ones who are going to go into those homes and help people complete that. So the number of people in the U.S. House of Representatives is critical for nonprofits. The allocations of federal dollars and the trust we have with the communities are the reasons why we need nonprofit organizations need to be involved in the census count. And you can look on the pie chart on the left that shows you the amount of allocation from federal funding. Now I'm going to tell you what NSO actually did during 2010. If you would go to the next slide. Education is absolutely critical when you're talking to the populations. NSO serves the homeless, seniors, individuals and families with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and at-risk youth. And I must say that we did a lot of educational forums with all these populations, but when we hit the youth, we hit their parents. And so they were very critical. The more we armed and educated youth became our voices inside their homes. So never underestimate the power of the young people in your schools and the people that you serve. So we had to do a lot of education with these special needs populations that are right within the NSO programming. We partnered very strongly with census workers who were their focus was to get the word out and to educate. So who better to partner with than to partner with them? So we brought them into our agency. We went with them when they had to do educational forums, but it was a very strong partnership with them because together we could come together and try to dispel some of the myths. And as you know now, with the issues around immigration in this country, if we had issues around people being fearful of deportation in 2010, it has multiplied 10 times over in 2020. And if we don't count those people, it's going to impact our dollars. Also, we trained our staff. Our staff were the ones who were actually inside people's homes. They were meeting with people in our offices, and so we had to train them because those were the real ambassadors who had relationships with individuals. We had to train them on what those envelopes were going to look like when they hit people's homes. We had to train them on what the census form looked like. Some people got short forms, other people got long forms, and I knew that our population, if they got a long form, the chances of them completing it was going to be 0 to none. And so we also knew that our population had literacy challenges. And so we had to train our staff because they had to help them get those forms filled out. So getting your staff ready is going to be very critical. And then really trying to help them understand the impact the Census Bureau has on what they depend on to live, their livelihood, their energy assistance, their children being in Head Start, their food assistance programs, their Medicaid health program, the lunch program that their children were going to be able to enroll in school. We had to make this really them understand how it was going to be personal. It had to be on a personal level for them. And then NSO played a big role in trying to encourage other nonprofits to understand the role they had to play in getting people counted for census count in 2010. We will play the same role in doing this in 2020. And so this is the reason it's important for nonprofits, and this is the role that NSO played in 2010.
Sheilah, whenever I hear you tell the story, I'm always so amazed by all of the work that you did and the amazing impact that, you've had in your community. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're going to move on now to Q&A and would love to hear from all of you. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and post them in the chat box. And I'm going to go ahead actually and start with a question for Sheilah. Sheilah, if there is a nonprofit that is just thinking about how they can be involved and make sure that the people that they serve are counted in the 2020 census, what is the one piece of advice that you would give them?
The one piece of advice first is to get the information, make sure that you've got the correct information. And we use Michigan Nonprofit Association a lot to help us with that, so that we had printed material, and we were able to arm ourselves in order to do the education. So get the resources, make sure that you can relate the Census Bureau to your particular population. I think that is absolutely critical. We had flyers all around the buildings. We were wearing T-shirts. So marketing this to make this real for people is going to be critical, but make sure you get the right information.
Yeah, that's such great advice, and especially that relating to your population and tailoring that information, I think is so important for the people in the communities that you serve. Hey, Joan, teeing you up next, we hear that, this is not your grandmother's census, right? So this is going to be different this time around. Sheilah referenced, making sure people don't throw away the envelopes, but there's going to have to be one more step after that, right? So why don't you explain real briefly just how this is going to work differently in 2020 than it did in the past?
Sure. As I alluded to earlier, there are a lot more challenges this time around than last time. And one of the biggest ones is that this time the U.S. Census Bureau has an Internet-first model. So whereas last time you did receive the survey in the mail and you filled out a paper survey and you mailed it in, this time you'll be getting a postcard and it will have a link on it, and you'll be asked to go online, click on the link, and fill out the form. So that's one of the cheapest ways to do it, and while that's going to be a great convenience for a lot of people in the state, we all know that that's going to be very challenging for a lot of other people in the state. So if you don't have Internet access, or if you're a senior citizen and you're really not that up on, computer surveys and that kind of thing, that's going to be a problem too. So there's also issues of privacy and cybersecurity, and we all know what happened when we tried, when the U.S. government tried to roll out the healthcare site. And so there's a lot of anxiety over this Internet-first model. And so we're going to have to address that. We're going to have to help people do that. We're going to have to address that. Now, there are going to be other ways to fill out the survey after that, but that is one of the number one ways that the U.S. Census Bureau has tried to save money this time around on the census. The other thing that they've done is that they've reduced the number of offices and field offices and workers. And so, whereas last time Michigan had their own office for our state in Detroit, this time we're served out of Chicago with 7 other states. And so that's kind of a problem as well. I mean, it's just always, spreading people's time and resources even thinner, which is one of the reasons why, frankly, we came up with this census hub model. We think that's going to address that situation where instead of we only have 5 census offices throughout the state right now, but we're augmenting that with our 8 to 10 census hubs that will be run by nonprofits. And again, the other big issue is the distrust in government, and it really is at a very high level right now, and not just with the immigrant community, but with, all kinds of people who think government already has enough information about us and that they're too nosy. And, so these are the kinds of things that we're going to be dealing with this time around that weren't necessarily such a big issue last time.
Great. Thanks, Joan. Starting to get questions please, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something for the nonprofits who are on the phone. Considering that this is going to be moving to the use of technology, if you've got a computer lab in your building someplace, then convene sessions where you are bringing your constituents in, and you're having Census Bureau census sessions where they're all sitting at computers, and you're leading them through that process, because I work with the homeless population. They're not going to have that technology. And so we'll bring them in, we'll sit them at the computer screen, and we'll walk them through and have them fill it out. But use the resources you have to help make this happen, considering that we're using technology this time, and a lot of the people that we work with and serve either don't have technology or don't know how to use this technology to get this completed.
That's a great point, Sheilah. Thank you so much. Hey, Lacy, we have a question from the group, and please, folks, continue to put your questions in the chat box. If groups are in the community now, how can they start the conversation with their community? And now is in caps. So how do they start that, and what are some key talking points?
I think the basic key talking point is, number one, that the census is coming, right? A lot of people are not inside of our bubble, this bubble that we know what's happening on the calendar. So the first part is that the census is coming. The second part is that, we have some really, really, really intelligent, bright people that are looking to make sure that this census is protected. So there's fear out there of these lists being pushed into the hands of folks who mean no good for what we're trying to do. Giving the community confidence that our Constitution, that the Census Bureau itself is not a part of the government, that they do their job and that they do it well. So trying to make certain that we're educating people to get ready, one, to know that the census is coming, two, to understand the structure of the Census Bureau. But I think more importantly for me is for us to get educated on all the nuances about what this census is, so that we're able to project and put out there the right information. I met with a bishop a couple of weeks ago and was asking him, when it comes to this work around democracy and protecting community, what did he see the number one barrier being? And he said that leaders need to be educated, that sometimes we don't have the right information, or we may have picked up information that is not necessarily correct and proper, and we tend to spread the wrong information. So I think before we do anything, making sure that we're educated, that we can give the right information, and the basic stuff. If census is coming, it's very well protected, and that people need to be a part of this census because they are a valuable part of the community. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. I love it's counting their voice, right? Making sure that they're heard. In terms of building off of what you just discussed, any specific guidance or thoughts for groups that are working with immigrants? Obviously, there's a lot of distrust in the community, and so anything specific that you would share or thoughts in terms of that community?
I would say become part of the complete count committee. The Census Bureau is there to help us to navigate that. One thing I will say, and this might not, I'm just going to say it. A lot of times I say things, and they just are what it is. For me, the African American community and other communities have no fear of deportation, so we have to push for us to be counted, because we understand the fear that arises for communities that are undocumented under this current administration. So one, to stave off the numbers being low, making sure that we, that are citizens, are being counted 100%. The other portion is that we are pretty certain from the Census Bureau that these documents, this information will not be forwarded to any other department in the government. I'd say that groups that are working with immigrant communities have to be part of the Complete Counts Committee so that they can gather and gain and get the information and training needed in order to make sure that their constituents are protected, that they can hear firsthand, because their work is going to be a lot more nuanced and delicate, and we want to make sure that those communities are protected as well. So that's the advice. Come aboard, be part of this committee, and get to meet the Census Bureau workers and things like that to have the confidence you need to do your work.
Great. And that's great. And then, Joan, could you also briefly mention, there's some resources that NALEO has and the messaging webinars that are available on the website?
Yes. If you go to the documents section or resources section of the website, we're going to be adding, as things go along, a number of reports and results of focus groups that have been done by organizations throughout the country. One of them was just completed by NALEO. That's an acronym that stands for, the National Association of Latino elected and appointed officials.
There you go.
And there's also another, pardon me?
Nope, I think someone just wasn't on mute. Go for it.
Oh, okay. And so there's been some others that have been done that have focused on other populations. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau held 2 focus groups here in Detroit. One was for the African American community and one was for the Arab American community. And they were talking to people about what would motivate them to fill out the census, why would they be afraid to fill out the census, and just trying to get into, basically get into the heads of people to say, how can we find out what will work so that we can create the messages and the messengers that will be most effective when it comes time to convincing people that this is something that's so important to do. And so all those reports will be on the website, as well as our webinars and all kinds of things like that have to do with the communications piece of this, which, as we all know, is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Joan, we've had a couple of questions about the technology regarding the census. So I wonder if you want to speak just a little bit. People are asking what type of technology is recommended for the best results. They have computers and their phones, tablets, iPads. Is everything like that going to work, or is there anything recommended?
So if anybody who knows me knows you should never ask me a question about technology. So you know what? I really don't know the answer to that, and I really don't want to guess. And so that would be a question.
I can go ahead and answer that if that's okay. Yeah, there will be. You'll be able to use phones. You'll be able to use iPads. You'll be able to use computers. So anything that has a internet connection is what you'll be able to utilize, and there will be an actual website that the Census Bureau is developing that folks will be able to go on and complete their census there from whatever system they're using. Right now, I'm not sure if there will be an app for folks to use or not. That'll be something that we can check in on, but yes, anything with an internet connection, you should be good. There's let's see. I'm going through the questions. A timeline for when all this is going to kick off. Who wants to take that? Joan, do you want to talk about just in terms of just kind of the big milestones until people get the census letter in the mail, and then when we'll be following up with unresponsive folks and that kind of jazz?
Oh no. Well, go ahead, Erin. I don't have the timeline right in front of me. Do you?
Oh, sure. So yeah, in terms of the timeline for the census, you'll be finding there'll be a lot of information coming out in 2019, and so folks know, in 2020, Census Day will be April 1st, which is a horrible day for Census Day. It's not a joke; it really is the day. And however, folks will receive in the mail prior to that a letter that will include a link for folks to know where to go to fill it out. It'll include a phone number. It'll include, if they want to complete it on the phone, or the phone number to call to get an actual paper form. So those will come out before April 1st. People will probably get that when the actual site for the census goes live in March of 2020, and then folks will have until about June to complete it, and during the summer of 2020, that's when there'll be a lot of follow-up with folks who haven't completed it. So that's kind of the general timeline. There is another timeline with milestones, I believe, listed on the Be Counted MI website, but if not, we'll make sure that we send it out to you after this call. Let's see. There are a question. Joan, you want to talk about the hubs? Where can they find information about the hubs? And they've all been identified except for one.
Yep. Again, we've got 7 hubs that have been identified in the state, and they are all listed on the Be Counted MI 2020 site. And as Erin said, we had our first call with the census hubs yesterday, and they are already starting to develop their local plans. They're thinking about who their advisory or who will sit on their advisory councils, what kinds of strategies and tactics are going to work in their hard-to-count areas. MNA will be providing data that gets right down to it's called the census tract, but really what it is a neighborhood for all intents and purposes, and demographic information of what kind of people live in that neighborhood, so that we can start to really hone our tactics to get people counted. That training will continue on all throughout 2019, leading up to 2020, when the actual boots on the ground will hit.
Great. I think we're still getting some background noise, so if anyone who isn't speaking could put your phone on mute, that would be great. Nellie, why don't you go ahead and move to the next slide. We wanted to get into showing you a checklist that's available, and this will be coming out to you after this webinar. And it's, again, just some ideas on how you can go ahead and get started now to support a fair and accurate census. It includes conversations internally with your organization. It includes ways that you can start to engage with the statewide campaign that Joan has described, and then ways that you can start educating and mobilizing your community, as Sheilah so eloquently spoke about, as the Neighborhood Service Organization has done. Next slide. You want to do the poll, Nellie? Are you still there, Nellie? There we go. So we have a next webinar coming up in December, and you'll see the date on a slide in a couple seconds here. But we're wondering what you would like the topic of the next census webinar to be. One option is tips for partnering with local government. Another is opportunities to collaborate with philanthropy, i.e. fundraising. And then the third is planning for action, which really would be more of a outline in terms of what you might want to do as an organization between now and 2020. So if folks can go ahead, Nellie, they should just go ahead and be able to click on it, right?
Yep. And we are getting responses right now.
Yay. Nellie, I'll let you run it since you can see it and tell us when we have the responses in and what was leading.
Great. It looks like we have about 60% of the participants who are on the webinar. They have responded, and right now it is the most popular option seems to be at the moment planning for action, the last option.
Perfect.
We'll give it another. Okay. Do you want me to close the poll?
Great. Yep, that's fantastic. If folks have any other thoughts or any questions regarding future webinar topics, would love to hear from you. Nellie, if you want to go to the next slide, then they can see the date for the next December webinar. And we really hope that you'll be able to join us December 10th. And thank you so much for participating in this webinar. Again, the checklist will be coming out to you. The slides will be coming out to you. The recording will be coming out to you. And we really appreciate all of our speakers, Sheilah, Lacy, Joan, thank you so much. Nellie for doing the technology. And thank you to all of you for taking your time to join us. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact MNA, and always happy to help you out. Thanks so much, everyone.